Hi there. A lot of people believe in the myth that heterosexuality is about producing children. There is this myth going on that heterosexuals are always fertile and homosexuals are sterile, that heterosexuality produces children and homosexuality does not. This has very little to do with actual reality. You see, heterosexuality is not about biology in itself. Instead, it is a story about an identity. And yes, this story is related to the genital parts that are involved in procreation, but it's several steps removed from the actual procreation. What is needed for procreation is an egg and a sperm. And the sperm can reach the egg either through intercourse or through insemination. These days, procreation can also be done in the test tube, but let's keep it simple. Let's keep it to things that people can do on their own without modern technology. So let's limit the discussion to intercourse and insemination. This idea that heterosexuality is about procreation, it is far younger than heterosexuality itself. In my previous video about homosexuality being natural, I explained that the concepts of heterosexuality and homosexuality are only 150 years old. Before the 1860s, there were no heterosexuals. Of course, throughout history, there has been people who would retroactively be labeled as heterosexual today, but they didn't have heterosexual identities. The idea of heterosexuality did not exist yet. When heterosexuality was invented, it was seen as a perversion. It was about people having sex without procreation. They were having sex because they were men attracted to women or women attracted to men. And this was seen as a perversion and a threat to society. Because you can get sexually attracted to people you're not married to, and this might create children born out of wedlock, which is a terrible thing in Victorian society. This myth that heterosexuality is about procreation, it rests on a number of assumptions, all of them false. We have the assumption that intercourse is always between two persons. In fact, it can be three or more. It is entirely possible for two gay men or two lesbian women to have sex with each other and a third person of the other gender for the sake of reproducing. And we also have the myth that sexuality is always about sexual attraction to the other person. In fact, it is very common that people who are not really attracted to each other, to the point that they're not compatible with each other at all, have sex with each other anyway, stimulating themselves with fantasies and so on. And third, we have this myth, which is the basis for the concepts of heterosexuality and homosexuality, that attraction to a person is always about the gender of the person. In reality, other factors are almost always important. They are quite often as important as gender, and in some cases they are much more important than gender. In some cases, gender doesn't matter at all. We also have the myth that everyone in fertile age is fertile, which is obviously not true. Some are on birth control, some are pregnant, some have various biological problems that prevent them from fertility. And we also have the myth that everybody are always attracted to people in fertile age. In fact, there are quite a few people who get attracted to women who are too old to have new babies, or sadly, those who are too young to have an adult sex life. Sadly enough, that exists as well within heterosexuality, by the way. This is still a part of, regardless of whether the person is actually fertile or not, and regardless of whether the person even has potential for being fertile, it is still a part of heterosexuality, the gender preference. If you live an heterosexual lifestyle and identity, this does not mean that your sex life will lead to children. And if you live a homosexual lifestyle and identity, this does not mean that your sex life will not lead to having children. The real difference is not between having or not having children. The difference is in effort and control. With homosexuality, procreation takes a bit more effort, but in return you have more control over it. Likewise, with the heterosexual sexual lifestyle, procreation takes less effort, but you have less control. When you sleep around with people of the opposite gender, there is a risk for unwanted pregnancies. When you have a homosexual lifestyle, you will only have children, you will only procreate when you plan to do so. And of course, heterosexual lifestyle and homosexual lifestyle, these are really new things. They have only existed for a few decades. Well, back 150 years ago, when the concepts were made, sure, there was things that could be called heterosexual or homosexual lifestyle, but those subcultures was very different from the subcultures of today. But the things that today would be wrongly labeled as heterosexuality or homosexuality in the past was much different. A woman who would today be called a lesbian, before the modern ideas of love, she would be seen only as a virtuous woman who would not have sex outside of marriage because she's not attracted to other men. So that would be all there is to it. Her having what she's doing in private with other women, that's more of her own business, and people would never know anyway. It varies from time to time and culture to culture, but new concepts keep popping up, and my personal guess is that heterosexuality and homosexuality will both be obsolete in a few decades. People will have forgotten all about them, like, ugh, that fad is over already. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, we will know in our lifetimes. Anyway, that's all I have to say for now. Live long and prosper.